Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Miss McCombie and today I'm going to give you my 5 top tips for proofreading and editing your work. So what is proofreading? Well, proofreading is reading back through your work, actively looking for mistakes and things you'd like to change. Editing is about making those changes, so maybe changing the structure of your piece of work or changing what you have written. Most people hate proofreading, myself included. And I get it, like you've spent ages working on this piece of work, you already think it's as good as it can possibly be, why should you have to go through it again and make changes to it? But you don't always have the luxury of having someone else check over your work before you hand it in. This is especially true if you are doing a folio piece just now. You're only able to get one person to mark it one time. And that means it should be your best possible work so that when they give feedback, they're not having to sift through silly mistakes that you already know how to change. The same goes for other pieces of work. You don't always have the luxury of having people check them over before you submit them, and you want to put your best foot forward. You always want to submit your best piece of work. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off then on tip number 1, which is give yourself time. So as I said, people tend to hate proofreading, and what they do, well, they will read through their essay once, maybe twice, and then they will just submit their work as it is. But the best thing that you can do is to give yourself a little bit of time. So once you've finished writing it, I would give yourself a day. Come back to it the next day. At minimum, 2 hours, okay? You have to give yourself a break in between writing it and proofreading it. That means you're much more likely to spot mistakes and you can look at it with fresh eyes. I would also suggest that you don't do your proofreading and editing all in one go. Have one session of proofreading and editing, then give yourself either a day or even just a break of a few hours, and then come back and do it again. And keep doing that until you're 100% happy with everything in your essay. And this is why it's so important that you don't leave your work to the last minute. We've all done that, even me. Tip number 2. So tip number 2 is reading your essay out loud. Most of us hate the sound of our own voices, but reading your essay out loud is a really good proofreading tool. It makes you far more aware of your mistakes because you can hear them. It's also really good in terms of if you are reading something out loud and you trip over a phrase, that means that it's probably not quite right and needs a little bit of work. Okay, I mean, if you've got a friend nearby who can hear you saying something out loud and they think something doesn't sound right, you can always get their advice, because you can only have one person read and mark your folio piece, but there's nothing in the rules that says you can't have someone nearby overhear what you are saying. Just a thought. Tip number 3. So tip number 3 is to read your work backwards from the end, sentence by sentence. Now this is really good because it stops you becoming what I call essay blind. Sometimes when people read their essays over and over and over again, they tend to become less aware of actually what they are saying and less aware of their mistakes. So a good thing to do is to read your essay backwards sentence by sentence. You can see, for example, sentences that aren't quite finished, or sentences that don't quite fit in, or more particular mistakes within each sentence because you're focusing on each one individually. You're really aware of what it is you are reading. Tip number 4. Be brutal. Okay? I understand it. This piece of work is your baby. You have spent time on it. You don't want to cut it apart. I ended up being way more violent than I meant it to sound. But just because you've spent ages on this piece of work doesn't mean it is perfect. Okay? And we can all get very precious about our own work. It's something that we've put all of our heart and soul into. Well, I mean, you really should have done if you're writing a folio piece. But it's something that you should have put a lot of work into. And therefore, having to cut bits out and change things and move things around feels wrong. It does, I know, because I used to do that as well. Okay, so a really good tip that someone told me was to take out your favourite sentence first, because that means you're a lot less precious about your essay, and it means that you're much more willing to make cuts that need to be made in order to make a really good piece of writing. And after all, you can always put that sentence back in if that is something that you really feel like needs to be there. Okay, but be harsh with yourself, cut things out that maybe don't need to be there. And that leads me on to tip number 5. Tip number 5 is don't delete everything straight away. And that is one of my most useful editing tips. I also used to do this at school. So as you are proofreading your essay, if you find anything that you think maybe doesn't fit there or anything you want to take out, cut and paste it either into the end of your Word document that you're working on or into a separate Word document. If you're working on your phone, save it to your notes, or if you are writing it down by hand, just put a line through it or highlight it or something. That means that you're not getting rid of anything and you have the opportunity to put it back into your piece of work if you change your mind about it later. Or you can rephrase it, or you can alter it in some way. But don't delete everything straight away, because then it makes it a lot harder to change it back if you want to. And there you have it, my top 5 tips for proofreading and editing. Now, if you are handing in a folio piece, make sure that it is your best piece of work before you submit it, because you only get one person to mark it one time. And that seems a little bit cruel, but you want to give yourself the best opportunity of doing well. So I would really recommend get your folio piece done well in advance, give yourself a chance to try out some of these proofreading and editing strategies, and then you can finish your piece of work and hand it in. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a like. I'd say subscribe, but I'm not very consistent with posting. I'm gonna try and get better at that. But in the meantime, I hope you have enjoyed this video and I will see you all later. Bye!